Dr. Judy, I love when we can have these assessments and these tests because so much of mental health is gray and complicated. And even though this isn't, the end all be all, it does give us a nice jumping off point to figure out our next steps. So first, what are these assessments and what is the goal?
So there's a lot of different types of attachment style assessments out there, but the idea is to just get to know yourself a little better. Again, as we've been talking about in this entire series, it's all about awareness so that you can understand your own strengths and maybe some areas for improvement, especially if it's getting in the way of you having better relationships or having a better and more fulfilled life. And it's just a jumping off point for discussion and a way to start working on certain coping skills. So this particular assessment that you and I and also other members of the MedCircle team took is one that was written by Diane Heller. And Dr. Heller has these workshops that she does with attachment theory. And so this particular assessment sort of has 4 quadrants where you look at the 4 different types of attachment styles. There's 10 statements in each quadrant, and you basically are able to say on a Likert scale how much you agree with each statement. And so on the secure side of things, there are questions like, I find it easy to flow between being close and connected with my partner to being on my own. For the avoidant dismissive type, a simple question would be that I insist on self-reliance, I have difficulty reaching out when I need help, and I do many of life's tasks or hobbies alone. On the anxious, preoccupied side, we have a sample question, for example, like over-focusing on other people. I tend to lose myself in relationships. And then finally, on the avoidant fearful side, we have a sample question. When presented with problems, sometimes I feel stumped and feel that they're irresolvable. Or when I reach a certain level of intimacy with my partner, I sometimes experience inexplicable fear. And so you just tally up your score and you see which quadrant you score highest on, and that will be your dominant attachment style. And then sometimes people have a secondary or a tertiary attachment style too.
If you've been enjoying the videos on MedCircle's YouTube channel, then you will absolutely find value in a MedCircle membership. At MedCircle.com, you can learn about all of the benefits of a MedCircle membership, including access to our award-winning video library and the ability to ask our doctors your questions. It's an incredible benefit that I want to invite you to take a look at. Use the links below this video or just go to MedCircle.com. Now, back to our discussion. And we were directed to complete this assessment through the lens of a relationship that we actually had. Now, I used a past relationship. So how would me using a past relationship possibly affect my results? Yeah,
so I think there's definitely certain people that bring up certain attachment styles in you.
Right.
And I think all of us have the ability to have secure attachment. I mean, that's the whole point of why we're talking about it, because there's something you can do to build towards a secure attachment. And you can probably think of people that you've dealt with in the past that brought out a more negative attachment style in you. And perhaps in your next relationship, it's not going to be like that. So that's how a past relationship might affect the results when you're thinking about how you were with this particular person.
Yeah, I just love the self-reflection this takes you through. Let's share our results. Dr. Judy, you want to go first?
Yeah, so I reflected on this with my husband, and this really just reinforced my feelings about choosing a great partner.
Woo, that's good.
Woo. So on the secure quadrant, I scored either a 23 or 26. We were kind of talking about this one question. I sort of read it differently. The question is, it's a priority to keep agreements with my partner. I do not think that it's important to disagree with my partner on a topic. I think it's okay for us to share our ideas, and it's okay if we don't disagree or agree. But some of the members of the MedCircle team, including you, read it as it's important to keep a promise. So if that's the case, then it would be 26 on secure. Otherwise, it would be a 23. On avoidant dismissive, I scored a 7, so that's kind of like a secondary style. Anxious ambivalent, a 0, and fearful avoidant, a 1.
A 1. Where was your 1?
My 1, let's see, where is it? Oh, my partner often comments or complains that I'm controlling. I'm kind of bossy.
Oh, okay, got it.
So that's my 1.
I scored 1 in that quadrant. I often expect the worst to happen in my relationship. And I do have those cognitive distortions that come up. Well, they're going to be unfaithful. And
it's over.
Be the end of it.
Totally. Interesting. What about you?
My dominant one was avoidant dismissive. So my gut during the series was correct. I scored 22. I scored 21 under secure.
That's great.
2 under anxious and ambivalent, and then, like I mentioned, the 1 under fearful.
What was your anxious ambivalent one?
When I give more than I get, I often resent this and harbor a grudge. It is difficult to receive love from my partner when they express it.
Oh, okay.
That's me.
Okay.
Yeah. Even when people say, I love you, you're great, I'm like, ooh, easy with the lovey-dovey stuff. Yeah, I got to work on that. But it was interesting because you and I seem to really score a lot of points in some big categories, but we did have a team member who scored a lot of points in a lot of categories. This person had 23 insecure, very high, 14 avoidant dismissive, 13 anxious ambivalent, and 10 under fearful avoidant. When someone sees a mixed bag like this, and it's really evenly distributed, at least out of 3 of the 4 quadrants, what should they take from that?
Well, so this team member is actually still primarily secure because that is the one that is dominant, and this person scored in the 20s. But the spread between dismissive and fearful and preoccupied is actually not all that uncommon. And sometimes we see this because a particular relationship tends to bring out certain insecurities in you. Sometimes it happens because that relationship wasn't all that stable. So you were sort of trying to navigate some of that, even though you're generally primarily secure. Other times it just shows you that there's certain things that you have to work through still. Again, just areas for improvement for your next relationship. And so I think that it's currently, thought of as a spectrum, as we talked about. There's sort of this spectrum of high emotional avoidance versus low emotional avoidance, high autonomy versus low autonomy, right? And it's really about where you sit in between all of that. And for most people, they are a blend of attachments. And in fact, nobody on our team was like, I scored 0 from all other 3, and then I had all of my scores only load onto 1. And so I think it shows that we do have a spectrum. And I think for people who see this mixed bag, it's good to go in like on an item analysis like we just talked about. And you can say, well, why is this one occurring in my life right now? Why is it that, for example, I find myself minimizing the importance of close relationships? Is it just because relationships truly aren't important? Or do I do that because I don't like to rely on others because people might disappoint me? And if you realize that there's something underlying that, that gives you a chance to engage with that piece of it and maybe do some work around that, challenge yourself in some way, actually do a behavioral experiment where you try to rely on a friend and go to them with a problem and give them an opportunity to be there for you so that you can actually change that dynamic.
Really good. We'll be back with our discussion in just a little bit, but I wanted to remind you that MedCircle is not just a YouTube channel. In fact, the MedCircle membership, which is available in both monthly and annual memberships, can give you access to a variety of our doctors where you have the ability to ask them questions and get answers. Visit medcircle.com or use the links below. Now, let's go back to the discussion. If I gave this to my parents and had them take it and I saw the results, what could I use with those results?
I think it's interesting because if you gave it to your parents and they actually showed maybe what you thought you would see, it's an interesting jumping off point to kind of talk about what their attachment was when they grew up, how they were raised. And I think that oftentimes it does transmit intergenerationally. So you will see a pattern as you go further and further back into generations. So I think it's just kind of a cool conversation to have, but also I think it's a great place to start if you want to improve your communication at any time with your parents or important people in your life, because you see what's important to them and how they generally operate, so that you can find the middle ground in terms of, oh, well, this is how I should approach them if I want something from them and I want it to be effective. So for example, if somebody checks the box of, when my partner arrives home or approaches me, I feel kind of stressed, especially when they want to connect. If that is somebody that's in your life, you find a place to negotiate that. Like, okay, what if I leave you alone for the first 30 minutes when you come home? And then we can talk about your day. Sometimes people just need that little bounce back and then they can totally engage.
Ooh, really good. Really good. Great conversation.
So fun.
I know we've had a lot of requests for this series, so I'll be excited to hear your thoughts on what your big takeaways were from this discussion on attachment styles. I'm Kyle Kittleson, and remember, whatever you're going through, you got this.